Should we start? What do we think?
Yep.
Andrew, you want to?
Yeah, good to go. Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming along, and we're hopefully going to take you through some of the background, etc. For Skip. You just click onto the next one, Julio. So the structure for today. I'm Andrew Crompton. I'm project manager from Manchester City Council Highways. I'm leading on this project, and so I'll give you a bit of an introduction about the scheme, about who's working on the scheme, where it's come from, funding, etc. Then Abigail, who's working with us from Sustrans, is going to talk about engagement. Julio, who's also working with us from Sustrans, is going to talk about the design process. Back to me to talk about the next steps, the trial that we're wanting to undertake, and then we've had some questions that have been circulated on Slido that people have voted, so we'll go through those, and then we've also got additional questions. So if you've got any questions, can you use the Q&A at the I think it's top right hand corner, and then we'll go through those. I think Bernard's on to kind of go through and identify which ones you'll get us to answer, and then kind of talk about the next steps. So just in terms of an introduction of people, as I say, I'm Andrew from Manchester City Council Highways. We're leading on the project. It's our highway, so we'll always be the ones who are responsible for putting in any projects like this. So we're responsible for sort of the planning, the highways authority aspects of it, project management. We're also backed up by a team of engineers who are working with the Sustrans engineers. This is something that's quite new to us, so we've got Sustrans in who've delivered this kind of thing somewhere else to get we can't just start fresh with this. It's a big scheme, it's a good scheme, it's a pioneering scheme. We want to make it right, so we've got the professionals in, shall we say. Then next up is Sustrans. As I mentioned, Abigail's been leading on the community engagement, backed up by a number of different people. We've been doing a number of events around the area, and we'll continue to do so. The design of the filtered neighbourhood, Julia will take you through that. And we've been doing work with schools in certain areas, so Abigail will take you through that. The Levenshulme Bee Network, they were fundamental for getting the bid and getting the money from the Mayor's Challenge Fund. I'll mention the Mayor's Challenge Fund in the next slide. They established the needs for this in the area, came to us with a suggestion for a bid. We then worked with them, built up a robust bid, submitted that to TFGM, the Mayor's Challenge Fund, and were successful in getting programme entry for the scheme. They're backed up by a number of street advocates who have been out and about and worked with them to identify issues, speak to people about what the problems are in their streets, in their areas, and will continue to be available for people to speak to about the scheme. And hopefully, if you've got any questions, you can speak to them, but also contact us directly. Finally, last but not least, TFGM. They're the project funders. It's a Mayor's Challenge Fund scheme, so we need to go to TFGM and provide them with a business case that they will agree to, and then they'll release the money. But I'll explain that on the next slide. The Mayor's Challenge Fund, a bit of background on the Mayor's Challenge Fund. Mayor Andy Burnham has decided to use some of the money from his Transforming Cities budget to improve cycling and walking, and so he wants to increase numbers of people cycling and walking. The benefits of that for people in general is good, but for the knock-on effect for health, etc., is really good, and the knock-on effect in terms of traffic and numbers of people, how people move around the city is also he's seen that as a benefit. So to get access to the money, we have to submit a bid, and last year bid was put in and it was assessed and given programme entry. So that means that they think strategically it's a good fit. They like the look of the scheme and think that they're happy to commit a certain amount of money towards that. So the next stage is that we have to develop a business case. So as part of developing the business case for this scheme, we'll be doing a trial. So we want to show to them that the scheme we're suggesting, the benefits will be this, and how we've shown that. Well, the trial shows that the benefits have been this. So we want to make sure that it fits for residents of Manchester and that it satisfies the business case. The business case is made up of a strategic case, an economic case, a management case, a commercial case, and a financial case. This is all sort of in line with the Treasury Green Book assessment of any spend by government. So this is all assessed by Greater Manchester Combined Authority. They then say whether it's a goer or not, and then we move on to the built scheme, just to sort of re-emphasize the point. At the moment, we're talking about a trial, so we would be putting in it wouldn't be a built scheme, it'd be a lot of temporary measures. So until we've gone through that business case process, and until it's been signed off by local councillors, the executive member for highways in Manchester City Council, we would not be building a scheme as such. So we're still in this consultation phase, we're still in this trial phase. Just in terms of the requirements that we need to meet for the Mayor's Challenge Fund, it's all around the made to move. We got a few questions about this yesterday. We've got some documents that we're going to post up hopefully later today, which show an awful lot about made to move. But essentially, one of the main sort of criteria that we've got for that is it's a competent 12-year-old or a double buggy test. So that is, we need to have a road, if the road's going to pass their made to move test, it needs to be quiet enough, safe enough for a competent 12-year-old to cycle down, and wide enough, navigable enough for a double buggy to go down. So those are at its most basic, those are the things that we're working to. As part of the work into that, we constantly get reviewed in our design. So this design that Julia is going to mention has gone through design review, and we will continue to go back. Any changes that we make as part of this consultation and part of this pause, we'll go back, speak to them. We need to make sure that they're happy with it. We want to make sure that obviously residents are happy with it, and then the people who are paying for it are happy with it. Again, something there that we'll have to complete as part of the business case is the Streets for All check. That's it. There's a lot more detail. Again, we've got some links on that, so we'll post them up later today, hopefully. The bid itself from Levenshulme, at its heart was this 10-minute walk around the centre of Levenshulme. So the aim is to try and reduce the number of car users doing it for short trips. We've found that we've got a stat on the next page, but there's quite a considerable amount of car journeys that are done for 1 mile or less, and it can be, and those kind of changes can make a massive difference. We're also looking at focusing around certain key places, destination points that people are going to be going to locally. So the schools are a case in point. So we want to be able to make the journeys to school and the area around schools as safe as possible for children. Also, kind of building in if people start to walk and cycle when they're young, it kind of builds through so that they grow with it. Increasing active modes of transport like walking and cycling. That's at the heart of the Mayor's Challenge Fund. That's what we have to aspire to. And the final point there is around, there's clearly a key severance point in Levenshulme, Burnage around Kingsway and the A6. So we want to make that as easy as possible to get through. Plus the railway line, there's a number of points that would go underneath the railway line. So we want to try and improve them and make them as easy to, they don't become a severance point essentially. So as I mentioned in the last slide, a TFGM stat that was the basis of the bid was that 30% of trips under 1 kilometre are made by car. So that's a third of the trips under 1 kilometre by car. It's a massive amount. If we can start to make a real impact on those, as the text says there, it's 15 minutes walk or 4 minutes cycling. People can fit those into their days. If they can do that, then it makes a real difference. You're taking an awful lot of traffic off the roads, making them a lot safer, making them a lot more appealing for walking and cycling. Another reason why, hopefully you'll be aware, Manchester's in a climate emergency. So we now, as any scheme that we do, we have to try and make it carbon neutral and try and improve anything to do with the climate. So reducing numbers of people driving will help to do that. Increasing people walking and cycling instead, making that modal shift will help to do that. And the knock-on effect is obviously an improvement in air quality around the whole area. The elements of the project. So Julia is going to talk about in a lot more detail about the filter neighbourhood, but in essence it's made up of modal filters, which will be where the roads are sort of blocked. Then we'll have other parts where we'll use traffic calming to reduce traffic speed, etc., and changing priority. So we may look at changing to one ways just to make it safe for people or reduce the numbers of cars on the roads. Another element of the project is the crossing and junction improvements. Got a really good response on where where people think that there should be improvements to crossing points and junctions. And we're working with urban traffic control, TFGM control all the junctions that we've got, and if it's signalised, they have to be part of the design for a signalised crossing. So we'll work with them to try and make improvements where we can, and all priorities will be around where the key routes are. We want to make sure that we're putting in crossings where people need them and the desire lines rather than where we think they need them. So the work that we've got on Commonplace is really useful to sort of show where people are going to be going. Third part of the scheme is around, I suppose, removing the barriers of why people may not be able to walk, cycle. So we've got bike hangers, parklets and bike ports. So the bike hangers will give somebody an opportunity to store a bike away from the house slightly, so you're not got the space to put a bike, or they don't feel that it's safe to put it in the shed, etc. Bike hangers are a safe storage point. It's like a row of cycle stands, but it's got a lockable cover, so 6 people get a key for it, and it's proved really popular in other areas of the country. Parklet is something where it's a reappropriation of road space, so it's a place for people to stop, place for people. So if they're walking in a certain area, so walking down the A6, it'd be a place for them to stop. I would be there, maybe meet up, have a chat with people. It's a change from what's there already, and it means that it may encourage people to walk a little bit further. And then the bike ports and cycle storage, we're looking at putting appropriate cycle storage and a bike port. A bike port's like a large cycle storage. It's got a car kind of on the side. We've got some photos online. I've probably not done it justice there, but essentially we wanted to find where people want to park the bikes and need the storage and put it there, so that we make it as easy as possible to park the bikes as close to where they need to go. And finally, school streets. Hopefully Abigail will go through a little bit more on this, but this is around working with schools to make it as safe as possible outside the schools. So we've been trialing some school street closures where we close a street at the morning and afternoon sort of times. It creates a safe space where children can be picked up, so they can go out on the road and play. It changes the focus of the road outside, rather than what people will have probably experienced, quite tricky some car parking, etc. It's not the nicest place outside schools at times.
Abigail, you want to take over?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Abigail Pound. I work for Sustrans on our collaborative design team, focusing on community engagement. And this slide is talking about the number of households within the scheme area, within the Levenshulme and Burnage scheme area, that don't own a car. So 39% of households, and this is higher than the UK average of just over 25%, and it's higher also than the Greater Manchester average, 32.6%. So there are actually a significant number of households in the area that currently don't actually have access to a car. And the next slide highlights the correlation between lower incomes and car ownership. So a lot of lower income households don't actually have access to a car, as you can see from these figures here. So there's potentially a real benefit for people on lower incomes. Just to run through our engagement to date, we had before the Sustrans were involved with the project, there was 3 initial public events at Arcadia that were well attended, and through those meetings the kind of project was developed, the scheme was developed, and people looked at the issues in the area and how an active neighbourhood scheme such as this could really help to tackle those. Once the scheme gained programme entry, there was a community street audit that lots of local residents went out and did of their roads, and that information helped to feed into the bid as well. So that was part of the bid development. And then once the scheme entry was gained approval, there was a lot of promotion then of the scheme and of ways that people could get involved. So the Levenshulme Bee Network advocates attended lots of meetings, community meetings and events to help promote the scheme. There was the Tell Us About Your Street survey. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. That went to all the houses in the initial programme area. And then there was the online survey as well. Again, I'll talk about that in a sec. We've been working as part of the Levenshulme School Streets project. We've been working with 6 primary schools across the area within the original scheme boundary, including Acacias, Cringlebrook, Alma Park, St Mary's, St Andrews, Chapel Street. And we also work with Levenshulme High as well to encourage the children and the young people at the school there to promote the programme to their friends and family and get the message out. So in order to increase representation and to speak to some of the voices that hadn't contributed so far, we organised a series of sort of pop-up events at Inspire, outside Tesco's, Burnage Lane shops, at Medina Mosque, and also there was an Open Streets event on 7th Street to capture people's thoughts and their issues and concerns. So we then held a community representatives workshop that was attended by representatives from faith groups, from schools in the area, from the Traders Association, and parks groups and residents groups. And we started to look at the classification of the roads in the area. So Julia's going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. We then held a drop-in co-design workshop. It was attended by over 100 people, and we were gathering more information about where improvements could be made to crossings, where people were struggling with issues around traffic, as well as looking at the road classification in more detail. We then had a couple more co-design workshops where we started to develop the designs in more detail and look at the locations of filters and the types of filters, and we held one of those over the Burnage side of the area at Christchurch, South Manchester, and one at Arcadia as well. So the postal survey went out to all the households in the initial project area boundary, and the area did actually increase to include the area north of Matthews Lane, which you can see on the map here. If you can see the map, it's probably quite small. And then also the area to the southwest of the area was added on as well. So those areas, because they weren't included in the original scheme, didn't receive the postal survey. But for those areas that did, we received 590 responses. Some people completed it online, and some people sent it in by post. You can see you've got quite a distribution across the area there of responses from the map. So in addition to this, there was the online survey on Commonplace, where people could put a dot in the map and say where there was issues of concern or things that they really like about the area. And we received 919 comments in total on the map at the point where we took the data off to do the analysis for the design process, which was at the beginning of February, although the information that is still being gathered beyond that point when people engage with the map. Yeah, that was great. So through the Commonplace map, we were able to capture some demographic information. So I thought it was worth popping these slides up here, which show relative to data on age, which is more recent. It's from 2018, and ethnicities from the census. But you can see here the comparison in blue compared to the Commonplace information, the Commonplace data that we received on demographics. So you can see the comparison there in terms of how we've done around representation. So throughout the events that we organised, which were promoted via kind of emails to community groups, posters, social media, we gathered comments from people where they had a geographical reference, where they had a location. We mapped those comments, and we were able to look at the Tell Us About Your Street comments and the Commonplace comments on the map, and to sort of analyse the information that was coming out there and the priorities for people in the local area. So You can see there's a report that was released on Friday that's got more detail on this, so you can have a look on the Levenshulme Bee Network page, and we're posting links today, and more information is going up there as well. But you can see more information on the findings on there, but just some of the key ones from the Tell Us About Your Street survey. The sort of top dislikes were speeding cars, litter, too many cars, pavements and pavement parking were the top ones. And then from the commonplace maps, similar priorities for people in terms of their concerns. There's too much traffic, walking here is not pleasant, I don't feel safe here, traffic's too fast, and traffic pollution. Hand over to Julio.
Great. So my name is Julio. I'm an engineer. I work for Sustrans, and I've been working with the Manchester City Council and the project team on developing the design for the trial of the filtered neighbourhood. So we started with the sort of collision analysis. So this is all the collisions that are reported to the police, and you can see that quite a lot of them, obviously, as expected, concentrate on some of the busier roads through the area. But when you look in more detail, it's actually very clear that while they do happen on the major roads, a lot of them happen at the junctions with minor roads. So maybe where there is a residential streets that intersects the major road, and a lot of these collisions are with vehicles turning in and off the major road, potentially rat running or cutting through some of the residential areas. So while obviously, you know, the major roads are sort of some of the concentration points, it's also the traffic that's cutting across the residential streets that contributes to the collisions. The second data set that was very useful in informing the proposals is the traffic data set. So this is telemetric, so mobile phone data that was collected over the course of 2019. We would have done additional sort of physical counts with some of those rubber tubes that you put on the ground, but due to COVID, the data would not have been representative. So we used the telemetric data instead, but you can see from the picture on the graph, sort of the bigger the pie chart, the higher the traffic volume. And the red proportion on each of the points is the amount of through traffic. So this is traffic that is cutting through an area versus the local traffic in blue, which is the one it's a trip that starts or ends in the local area. So you can see that the vast majority of traffic is just cutting through the area. It's not residential traffic. We met with the local community, and we did some sort of co-design workshops where we looked at classifying the streets in the area. And the first one that we did was a street classification workshop where we asked local residents to define what some of the strategic roads through the area are, what the connector roads are, and what the residential roads are. You can see the tracing paper used on the left, kind of showing some of the outputs. So obviously most people identified sort of Kingsway and the A6 as obviously sort of strategic roads. And then there was quite a bit of debate around what the connector roads are, you know, whether these roads should be used for local access only or whether they should be used for people traveling across the area. So you can see some of the outputs in blue and the overlay on the right. Based on this, we sort of developed this initial map from the outcome of the workshop. And actually, I would say in the Greenbank area, there's a lot of consistency in the sort of the classification of both Matthews Lane and Broom Lane. And yeah, just sort of, there was a lot of consistency, while in some of the other areas, maybe towards Burnage, there was a lot more contention about the roads, for example, Irwood Road and Burnage Lane. I would say in this area, there was quite the views were quite consistent across the various stakeholders that did the exercise. And based on this, we developed kind of the filtered neighborhood boundaries. So the lines in green are the roads that still accommodate through traffic, and the roads that don't have a color are the ones that become access only. So I'll try to explain maybe some of the different treatment that was done in the different areas. So you can see that in the Kringle Park area, two of the roads here that were initially deemed blue were then decided not to be open to through traffic. And the main reason for that is that they're very close to parallel A roads, which are sort of the obvious route that through traffic should be taken. While in the Greenbank area, there isn't really an obvious A route sort of in close proximity, which should be taking the through traffic. So because of that, we kept Cromwell Grove and Matthews Lane both as green routes, and similarly Broom Lane, which we know has a lot of issues, and Mount Road, which has a lot of issues with speeding and high levels of traffic. There's no parallel road in very close proximity, which the traffic should be using as an alternative. So this is sort of a zoom in of that initial map showing the amount of through traffic using the streets. And you can see that obviously Barlow Road, Stockport Road, a lot of through traffic, and Matthews Lane as well, but some of the residential streets as well that we classified, so things like Stovall, Manor Road, even Northmoor, have very high proportions of through traffic using these streets. So the vast majority of traffic on these streets is not local residents, but it's just people using it as a way to get through the area. So I'm going to try to explain in this section a bit of how we developed the locations for the filters. And this was initially started at a co-design workshop, but then Sustrans worked on it with Manchester City Council engineers, who are the local authority and have to approve, the local highway authority, and they have to approve all the proposals. So I'm going to try to explain kind of the key routes through the neighborhoods, which we try to prevent by putting the filters where we have. So you'll see this first map, it sort of outlines the two principles at the top. The principles of a filter neighborhood is that every property can still be accessed by car, and that cars can't travel straight through the neighborhood. So if they want to travel straight through, they have to use these green roads. They can't cut through the residential streets. So this first map here in the blue lines show the kind of north to south movements, and there's quite a few sort of parallel roads. These are useful to think because there's a bit of a danger. For example, if we look here in the northern section, if we just were to put a modal filter here, it would just displace onto the parallel route. So it's useful to highlight all of them, and we don't want to displace traffic onto another residential street. So you'll see the picture on the right kind of shows with just 3 filters, we can sort of prevent all of these north to south movements. And we can also ensure that the residents access sort of their closest boundary road. So you'll see the 2 filters that are proposed here and the 1 filter that's proposed further to the north. Obviously, this filter here is on a bus route. So it can't be a physical filter, it can't be a bollard, so it has to be a bus gate. So this is what a bus gate looks like on the right. This is a picture from Aberdeen in a residential area. And there are many similar bus gates in many residential areas in London, but also outside of London. So in Chelmsford, Basildon, Colchester, Wapping, Sheffield, and many more. So obviously there's no bollard in the middle because the bus has to come through, but there's very clear signage saying buses only. And it's enforced with a camera. So there's a camera that takes a picture of the registration plate, and then a fine can be issued if they're not exempt. So you can decide to exempt certain people. For example, blue badge holders could be exempt. Similarly, emergency services could be exempt. The fire brigade, the police could be exempt. And what does the filter look like on the other hand? So where we don't need to allow buses through, we can actually put a bollard, or we can put bollards, or we can put planters. You know, in the future, we could have something more permanent, but because this is a trial, we'll not be putting curbs, we'll not be putting sort of concrete structures, we'll not be putting benches or trees. This has to be a trial. So for the trial phase, it'll be something that can be moved or removed. And then if the scheme is approved, then it can be, you know, we can install planting, we can install benches, we can install all sorts of things as part of the filters, particularly the fancy filters. So I looked at the sort of north-south movements in the first slide. Now the second set of movements is the east-to-west movements. And there's only one real east-to-west route which remains open, because obviously Manor Road, in that first filter, we've already prevented it. So there's only one more east-to-west route, which is why we've put this diagonal filter here, which forces people to sort of turn back on themselves, so you can't travel straight through the neighborhood. And then the third set of movements, of which there are a lot in this area, is the kind of the corner cutting movements. So these are movements that try to avoid some of the signalized junctions, for example, up here and down here. So instead of, you know, going all the way to the traffic lights, maybe getting stuck in during traffic, if you want to turn, a lot of the sat navs will tell people to just turn left and cut the corner. So we wanted to put some filters in to ensure that that didn't happen. So that's the reason for the filters here on the right. So you'll see the additional filter here in between the parks, which in the future could be used to actually physically link the parks together. And if that's not necessary as a road, it could just be, you know, grassed over and join up the 2 parks. And similarly down here, there are a few complementary filters that just make sure that none of those rat runs open up. And I think another point worth making is that while some of these may not currently be a rat run, obviously I talked before about the issue of displacement. So someone may try to be currently using the most convenient one, but if you close that one off, then there's a danger of that displacing onto another residential street. So that's why we take a holistic approach in all the cell. So that looks like this in the proposals at the moment, and I've highlighted a couple of dots in red, which are potential additional areas that some of the residents have fed back on, where maybe there's still a bit of an issue with rat running that may still be open. So we're still looking at these with the design team, and before we sort of settle on a design for the trial, we'll be making a decision on these, and obviously we'll be notifying residents both through the sort of social media pages, but also in the letter which will be sent before anything goes on the ground. A letter will be sent with the final scheme, so you know exactly what to expect from the trial. And this is a map which kind of shows that things that I was talking about before in terms of the access routes and the impossibility to travel through the area. So each colored area shows how far you can travel in a car once you enter one of the residential areas. So if you enter here from Matthews Lane to the north, these are all the streets you can drive to, but you can't drive further north. So no one can cut through. You just have to exit back the same way you came. And similarly, in the southern section of the area, you can see that there are no open routes to cut all the way north to south or east to west. People are sort of kept in the local area, people who are driving. And then if you want to go across the whole area, it becomes more convenient, quicker, and safer to do so by foot. So what do we expect this will have an impact on the local area? So the streets highlighted in green are the ones that are going to be filtered and are the ones where we expect significant reductions in traffic volumes. So the through traffic that is currently using those streets will not be using it anymore. So you can see the traffic volumes drop significantly, and traffic speeds will drop as well. And this will tend to increase road safety and air quality. Based on evidence from similar schemes, some of those local trips will be done by walking instead of driving. So there'll be an overall reduction in the number of cars using the whole area, and that will lead to an improvement in air quality in the whole area and improvement in road safety. So the evidence from other schemes really is that people, for those short trips that before it was a 2-minute drive, now you've kind of got to go all the way around a filter, and you're like, oh, I might as well walk it. And that's obviously less pollution, less emissions, and less road danger, which delivers benefit for all the residents in the area. This picture here, this video here on the top right, is an example of a filter that was put in just last week in Dulwich. So this was the road before, so I'm sure scene is familiar to lots of you. Lots of queuing traffic. It's very difficult to join that major road. There's lots of pollution and lots of congestion. And after the filter was put in, this is what the street looks like at the moment. So obviously, no queuing traffic, no congestion, very safe for people to walk, safe for people to cross. There's actually children playing in the street at the bottom of the video. So a completely transformed street with less speeding, less traffic, way easier to cross, and improved air quality. And I think it's useful to think of them compared to lockdown. We saw during lockdown, we saw a lot of people deciding to maybe walk or cycle their local journeys because it was a lot more pleasant. And this is the same kind of transformation that you can expect from a filtered neighborhood on the residential streets. This is useful in terms of looking at the journey times. So we've looked at the sort of how does this affect someone who maybe wants to drive to Tesco for their weekly shop on a Saturday. We just simulated someone on Lonsdale Road, and at the moment, obviously, they just drive down and use Manor Road and go down to the Tesco's, which takes about 4 minutes. And with a filtered neighborhood, they can't do that anymore, so they have to go up to Matthews Lane and around, and it takes an extra, between 0 and 3 minutes according to Google, which is a bit of a delay, but it's not a huge delay, and it might prompt someone to, for example, walk it because it's only an 11-minute walk, or maybe cycle it, and because those streets will become really quiet, it will become safer to cycle it as well. So maybe people that are less confident on a bike might decide to do that. It's important to also talk about the boundary roads. So far I've focused on kind of the residential streets in the area, but we can't forget about the boundary roads, the ones in green. And evidence from similar schemes does suggest that there's a bit of a short-term increase in traffic volumes. Obviously, everyone asks the question, if you're closing that road, where do those cars go? And the answer is that, yeah, the first day, they'll probably go on another street. And for the first few weeks, maybe they'll stay on those streets. But in the long term, that traffic evaporation that I talked about will happen, and people will start cycling or walking some of those local journeys. So there will be fewer cars on the road. So the evidence from elsewhere suggests that some of the increases on those boundary roads can be between 3 and 28% for the first few months. And then after that, the traffic volumes return to what they were before the trial. And I think, the key point here is that it all depends on kind of how the local community responds to this. So the trial really is the only way to ascertain or to determine that traffic evaporation value. It can't be modeled, it can't be sort of simulated. A few points though on the benefits on the boundary roads. I think, obviously people see the figure of 3 to 28% of traffic increase, particularly if they live on that street, and they think, that's going to ruin my local environment. It's going to make air pollution worse. But actually, I think some of the points that are made here, so the evidence from Waltham Forest is actually that the air quality did not become worse on any of those boundary roads because the traffic evaporated. So there was, I think, about 15% reduction in total distance traveled by car in the area. So the air quality improved across the whole area, including on those boundary roads. And I think it's also important to think that, yes, you might live on that road where the traffic hasn't dropped to a traffic-free street, but your local neighborhood still benefits from that. So if you're going to the shops, if you're going to visit a friend, if you're going to the park, if you're going on a school run, you'll still be making most of that trip on those very quiet streets. So you'll be benefiting from the improved air quality, from the improved safety, and from just the improved experience. And also on the boundary roads themselves, the evidence does show that there's an improvement in safety, because even if the traffic volumes increase a little bit, those side roads will have many fewer cars coming out of them. So there's less danger of collisions there, particularly if maybe you're walking along the footway on that major road. There are less cars that are sort of cutting across you and may not see you, and that sometimes happens, and so there's many of the collisions. So it's a lot easier to cross those side roads. And it's also, I think, important to say, someone said in the Q&A already, that actually, while there may be a little bit of increase in traffic volume, that doesn't necessarily mean more congestion, because with fewer cars trying to join from the minor roads, those movements of trying to sort of jam into the queuing traffic, there's less of them. So the flow may actually be a little bit smoother. And the last point here, which I make, is the improved crossings as well. Obviously, the filtered neighborhood trial is just one of the elements of the scheme. And the active neighborhood does have, plans to improve crossing points, even on those boundary roads, which are very important. As part of the trial, some things can be done, some things can't be done. So in a trial, everything has to be temporary, but Andrew will be touching on later in terms of the things that can be done for traffic calming and for improving crossings even during the trial. I quickly want to touch on a couple of alternatives which we've looked at and are worth discussing quickly. So one of the alternatives that has been raised is potentially, the idea of filtering Matthews Lane, not Matthew Lane, Matthews Lane, to sort of prevent the east to west traffic from using that street. The issue with doing that is that the only alternative remaining street is then Cromwell Grove, which is not necessarily more suitable for through traffic compared to Matthews Lane. So it would also have to be filtered as well. And if we filter both of these, you can see that all of a sudden this area, it becomes a very large area without an obvious east to west route all the way up to Stanley Grove. And kind of the area of this cell, we call them cells, which is a really ugly name, but it becomes very large, and actually the likelihood of someone walking all the way from the top all the way to the bottom is quite low. So someone is still likely to drive those trips. There's less likelihood of traffic evaporation. So we tend to focus on sort of slightly smaller cell sizes. And also Stanley Grove, it probably is a bit more of a carrier road than Matthews Lane, but it's still not an A road, like we've seen on the A6 and on Kingsway, which are obvious alternatives to Irwood Road and Burnage Lane. The second suggestion, which has been suggested, is to reduce traffic on Mount Road. So this could be done either by filtering Mount Road. So if you put a filter down here, or maybe filtering Barlow Road to the east. And this would create an even larger cell, which is this one all the way up here, out through Reddish. And this would be a much bigger area, and kind of all the east to west traffic would then have to travel all the way up to maybe probably the A6, 010 and away and across. And this would be quite long detours, but also a much bigger sort of ambition that has been delivered anywhere. So the area is just very, very large. And in our experience, the best approach is to start with slightly smaller cells, let that behavior change. Once most people that can walk those short journeys start walking them and you see some of those traffic evaporation, then maybe you can build onto larger and more ambitious cells. This shows a bit of a comparison in terms of some of the cell sizes that have been delivered and some of the tension between the small and large cell. So if the cell is too small, so if you're only filtering, a couple of streets, the benefits are only felt on very few streets, and it also doesn't create those longer routes which are traffic free and which are more practical and endurable to walk and cycle. So that means that there's less mode shift and less traffic evaporation, and all you're doing is you're pushing those car journeys onto other streets. Similarly, if the area becomes too large, those distances that you're trying to get people to walk become 2-3 kilometers, which is not very practical for most people. So again, people will just drive all the way around, and you won't see that mode shift, which again is not what we want to see. So here we've got some comparisons of similar projects around the UK and some of the sort of areas, some of the filtered neighborhood sizes. So there's some in the sort of smaller region between 0.3 and 0.5 square kilometers. Increasingly, we're seeing quite a few in the sort of 0.5 kilometer to 1 square kilometer range, and some pushing up to 1.4 square kilometers. But these alternative plans here, the area for this larger one, I think is about 6 square kilometers, which is much bigger than anything ever delivered. And the point at the bottom again, that cells can be joined up once the behavior change starts. Back to Abigail for school streets.
Okay, yes, so as I mentioned, we've been working with the 6 primary schools in the initial scheme area, and the children went out and did the big street survey. So they were surveying their streets, they were looking at their journeys to school, and we then developed with each school a design. So they were co-designed some solutions for outside the school. And they were highlighting very similar issues across the different schools. There's a real similar experience outside the schools at picking up and dropping off time. So dangerous junctions and crossing points, pavement parking, noise levels and air quality were highlighted. So those design proposals were shared at some of the engagement events, and we've been meeting with the head teachers from the schools over the last week to look at how we can take things forward, because one of the key design solutions for outside the school is what's called a timed school street closure. And I think they were shared on the vision map, and cause a little bit of confusion in that people might be a bit worried about accessing their property if they're within a school, a timed closure area. So the idea is that during drop-off and pick-up times, that the street outside the school is closed to motor traffic. And this means that you have a much safer and more pleasant environment for families and for residents, and it gives more parents the confidence to walk and cycle to school. But residents can still get access. So residents can still get access, emergency vehicles can, you can still have drop-offs of, school trips going out and etc. This can still be accessed. So the idea is that with 5 of the schools that we've spoken to, that we'll be looking at school street timed closure trials for one day. And the great opportunity there is for residents to experience it, parents, families to experience it, school staff to see what it's like, and for everyone to feedback and say what they think about it. So there's an opportunity to trial those. There's actually a question in Parliament over the last week about the Secretary of State for Transport answered the question on school streets legislation because there's different powers in Greater London. So it's looking quite positive that there'll be a change there that will enable enforcement powers for local authorities outside of Greater London, and that would really help with the a longer term trial of timed school street closures and the sort of permanent implementation of them. So yeah, that's just a little bit on school streets there, but also there's a real need to work very closely with schools in terms of activation and support for people to transition to walking and cycling to school. So looking at park and stride options, looking at walking buses, looking at the kind of training and support that families might need, travel planning, that sort of thing. So there's lots more work to do on that front to make sure that the parents are supported to make those changes.
Right, so just want to talk to you about the sort of the next steps of what we're going to do. So at the moment, you'll hopefully be aware that we're going to be doing a trial, but this is kind of the sharing stage. We've paused the trial because people have asked for more information and the thinking behind the vision map, etc. So we're going to provide more information. We've uploaded a report behind the vision map, some FAQs. We'll be updating any questions that we get. We'll be updating every week and putting them on as a PDF document so that people can refer to that. That'll include any questions that we get directly, either emailed or on Commonplace or through social media or through events like this. The plan will be to use a experimental traffic regulation order, which means that once we put that in, we've got 18 months to either make permanent or cancel the order. In that 18 months, we want to trial this to see if it works. As I think Julia has mentioned before, the best way to show people that don't think it'll work or to prove it will or won't work from both sides. At the moment, we've got people saying that we think this will work, we've got people saying this won't work. So we need to be able to trial it to show that it will or won't work and it will or won't deliver the benefits that we think it will for the business case. This was part of the bid that we put in. We said to TFGM, as part of the development of the scheme, we'd do a trial to make sure that it was fit for purpose for the people, residents of Levenshulme and Burnage, and that it delivered on the benefits that we think it will deliver. So that's the process that we're going to do. Using an experimental TRO means that we can make changes in the trial. It means that we don't have to keep on going back and updating the TRO. We can take things out quite simply. The picture on the slide there shows what it will look like potentially in the trial. It's going to look temporary. It's not going to be anything built. It's just to sort of re-emphasize the point, it is a trial, so we're not going to be building out the filters if they're not going to be there permanently. Alongside some of the work that we'll be doing on the filters, we'll start looking at improving things to make the whole active neighbourhood work. So we'll start looking at putting in crossings. We'll start improving junctions. We'll start looking at traffic calming. The challenge is that we have to do the trial to get the funding. We haven't got the funding yet to do all these things. So we would have to, as Manchester City Council, underwrite that with the risk that the funding wouldn't then be given. But we can do that. We'll speak to our Treasury to look at delivering things because it's fundamental as part of the trial. In terms of what we'll be doing in monitoring and reviewing, it's going to be for a 6-month trial. So we'll be looking at reviewing after 1, 3, and 6 months. So producing a report after 1, 3, and 6 months to say, here's what's gone on, here's outcomes, etc. But that's not to say that anything can't change in between those times. If there's something that's not going right, it doesn't have to wait another month for it to change, or 3 months or 6 months. Things aren't working, or we've got an improvement, we can change it. That's why we're using this approach. Alongside the kind of putting in the filters, the crossing, etc., we'll be doing some air quality, traffic, walking and cycling monitoring. We've already done some at key locations around the area. Then COVID came along, so we've struggled to be able to get accurate traffic monitoring for all parts of the area. So we're working with our colleagues at TFGM to use what they've got to try and develop a model for the area. As Julio's mentioned, we've got some pretty useful telemetric data from the last year, which they're comfortable with plugging into their modelling information. So we're going to be using that to try and model impacts of things, plus working with the University of Manchester to install a number of monitors around the area. So you may start to see them on the street lighting columns. So that'll be a big black box that'll either be a air quality or traffic, walking or cycling monitor. We'll use that information plus the feedback that we've had today and additional feedback that we're going to be having as part of the pause and as part of the overall consultation when the trial starts. That'll all go into and be collated by our Manchester City Council. Have got a performance research and intelligence team, and they specialise in this kind of thing. So it's an independent group away from this, away from highways, away from anyone involved. So it's got that impartiality to assess it and see what the feedback is and see what people think about in the area, and then all that information gets fed back to the local councillors and to our exec member for highways. they make the decision whether the scheme goes ahead or not. And then, like I mentioned a few slides at the start, we then put that into the business case. TFGM look at all this information as well and decide whether they want to fund it. And then we get approval for funding and we build the scheme. Throughout all this, we wanted to sort of emphasise that we want to communicate all the outcomes. So we'll be, in the pause now, we've got an opportunity to give you more information and get some more feedback. So we'll be promoting and publishing information on the website, on the Manchester City Council website. Additionally, trying to do some sessions like this and hopefully try and do some face-to-face sessions, if not indoors, at least outdoors, but we're looking at guidance for what we can do indoors to try and get back to, we would have done those kind of things in the last 3 months, but we've not been able to. So this kind of thing isn't ideal for everyone. We want to try and reach out to as many people as possible. We're working with the neighbourhood teams to try and reach harder to reach groups, and but we would welcome if somebody's got any ideas about how to reach certain groups, and we welcome those kind of things because we want to get as much feedback from as many people as possible. In terms of communication, we'll be writing a letter out to our residents next week to explain the pause, what's going on next, etc. Where to look for more information, and then we'll work with residents, get some suggestions, get any changes. We'll then, before we go out to any trial, we'll write out again to explain what the trial will be, when it'll happen, and the proposal for the trial, and then how people can give feedback on that trial. So yeah, I think that kind of covers it. Next, next we've got some slides. So
yeah, that's right. So now we're gonna do the first part of the Q&A, which is the questions that were uploaded through Slido, and then we'll do a second part where Bernard will help us handpick some of the questions from the Q&A. I see there's 56 of them. We won't quite have time to go through all of them, but hopefully some of them will be answered in this first part of the Q&A. So the first question, why hasn't a one-way system been considered? We partly discussed this yesterday at the Chapel Street webinar. I guess there's a few issues with one-ways. I think in particular the question refers to maybe a one-way system on Barlow and Cromwell. So part of the issues with that is that one-ways, standalone, and they tend to lead to increased speed. So we can obviously do things to the carriageway to sort of reallocate road space and maybe traffic calming to try to counter that. But fundamentally, if you know that nothing is coming the other way as a driver, you're more likely to speed. And this touches on the point of, even if we make it one way, it will still be used as a through route to the area. So it's unlikely to result in that evaporation that we want. We really want kind of roads to not be an option to drive through them if they're not deemed appropriate for through traffic. Another couple of, I guess, issues with the one way is that it potentially just displaces the issue onto Matthews Lane. So those two really need to be looked at in conjunction. And there's also an issue with the idea of trialing a one way on a street with buses in two directions is very tricky in terms of having to work with TFGM to maybe have to potentially rearrange temporary bus stops, rerouting, and having to monitor that kind of the bus network performance. It's just quite a complex piece for a trial. So it's not really an option for the trial phase at the moment. The second question, who decided that Cromwell Grove, Barlow Road and Matthews Lane were severance roads, so the green roads? Why can't traffic be reduced on them? I think I answered this partly in the questions at the start. So obviously there's a community workshop that was done at the start, and we're very aware that was just a very, very small percentage of the community who participated in that. But you need some east to west roads through the area for some of the major traffic that is using the areas, and there's no alternative A road in close proximity, as I discussed before. So that's why for the time being they're considered to be important through routes. It's also decided in partnership with MCC. They're the Highways Authority. Some of these roads, for example, some of these roads are sort of perform an important strategic function. So we can filter them for this trial at the start.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, this is something that isn't. It's not anyone in this sort of team. It's certainly not my kind of decision on things. We've got a road classification map of the area, and Cromwell's been deemed as a C road in the area, and flows through to Barlow, and part of Matthews is the same. So our sort of classifications team, the way that we approach in terms of highways maintenance, deems those roads as more significant than a residential road. So I can post this classification map on the website just for a bit more information.
The third question, will you still expect to see traffic evaporation given you have not removed through traffic? So I can go back to the slide from before that shows kind of how many north-south routes there are currently available and how many east-to-west routes there are available. So at the moment, there are 4 north-south routes and we are closing 2 of them off to through traffic. So when you reduce that capacity, it tends to result in traffic evaporation. And similarly, east-to-west, there are currently 4 routes and we're going down to 2. So again, this would lead to traffic evaporation for through traffic as well. The fourth question, traffic will back up on busy unfiltered roads. Old houses have a breathable construction, so we'll be breathing fumes in our living rooms. So as I said before, you know, the fumes come from obviously from the cars, and the more cars there are, the more the fumes. So the schemes like this have shown to reduce the number of vehicles traveling through an area. So the air quality benefits are felt by everyone, even on a street where there may be a short-term localized increase in traffic, the air quality benefits are felt on those roads as well. So we really do expect the air quality to improve, but as Andrew said, we'll be monitoring them. So there'll be monitoring points that will be, you know, monitoring how the streets are performing, both the ones that are being filtered and the ones that are not being filtered.
Yeah, just to back that up, yeah, we will be doing monitoring all the filtered, unfiltered roads, etc. And it goes back to the kind of if people are starting to make those small journeys, they're not doing those by car. It lifts the amount of local traffic that's traveling those routes.
The fifth question, will residents on busy unfiltered streets be compensated for the drop in their price caused by the scheme? Again, there's no evidence to suggest that filtered neighborhood scheme tend to result in a reduction in property value. Yeah, so no, there's no plan for compensation for that. It's not kind of an unexpected outcome. What will be done to stop the buildup of traffic on the Barlow Road extension from Mount Road to Longford Road? So this is the kind of eastern section of the area, and as I said, obviously the kind of both this area but also the Chapel Street area, they result in a significant reduction in just the amount of road space dedicated to that east to west through traffic. So the number of kind of roads that traffic can go into. So as it hits that, obviously it builds up there, but once it arrives to that junction, there are then potentially 6 or 7 routes that at the moment it can go through. So by blocking those routes off, we will significantly reduce the appeal of that map. And you know, where these schemes have gone in place in the past, it's been noticeable that Google Maps and Waze have actually redirected people towards the A roads, because all of a sudden cutting through those residential streets is just not worth it. So the traffic goes on the A roads instead. So that's what we're expecting. Will cars and refuse vehicles be able to turn around in the new cul-de-sacs? So yeah, I mean, refuse vehicles, the refuse services have to approve the plans. So we're working with them just to ensure they've got the right turning heads and the right spaces to turn. I would say in our experience, refuse collectors find actually the most stressful and dangerous experiences are on those busy rat runs when you've got lots of cars trying to overtake the collectives who are getting off on and off at every door front, and you're having cars overtaking them in both directions. So they tend to find it a lot of a safer experience once the street is filtered. And even if they have to reverse a short distance, if there's no traffic, you know, it's a bit like down a cul-de-sac. It's really safe for them to reverse. It's a lot more pleasant and a lot safer because all those cars are no longer there trying to maneuver around them. But this point links to the emergency services, and there was a question yesterday in one of the other webinars, and emergency services are statutory consultees, so they have to approve any plan before it goes on the ground. Even a trial, they have to approve it. And so, you know, in some cases they'll say that's fine, that's not a major route that's needed, but in some cases they'll say, yeah, that's a major route. And in those cases we can place a bollard with a lockable key that they've got access to, so they can unlock that bollard and go through, and that actually often accelerates their response time, the emergency services. And if at any point one of the emergency services determines that the scheme is affecting their response time, that often results in the trial being changed or being removed completely. There's an example in Brixton where a scheme was removed because of kind of objections from the emergency services in the past. Well,
yeah, sorry, just on that, I noticed on one of the Q&As there was a question about this, about whether certain fire brigade or fire stations have been informed. We've chased that up actually, because we sent something through to a kind of an email address that sends to all, and it seems like something's not happened. There's been a breakdown within that, so we're now got a better solution for all that. We do send out everything, and as Julio said, there's statutory consultees, so we send everything out to all emergency services before we go to any sort of public consultation, before anything goes out, to make sure it's fit for purpose. And we've now chased up with different station managers, etc., and it seems like the internal process that they have isn't working too well, so we've now got dedicated contacts for different places. So we're now in a sort of a more formal dialogue about this, but other highway schemes.
The next two questions are quite similar. Why is nothing being done to Cromwell Grove and Mount Road? And why is nothing being done about the large volumes of traffic on Mount Road each day? So obviously we're not filtering these streets. As part of the trial, this is not deemed appropriate for the time being. But we're going to look at traffic calming. We're going to look at potentially improved crossings. The improved crossings, the complexity is obviously they need quite significant civils works. So there's kind of the approvals process is a bit longer and the investment process is a bit longer. But it's something that Manchester City Council knows it's part of the solution, and it's definitely something that we're looking at delivering to support the filtered neighbourhood scheme. And as I say, I think it's important to remember that not just to look at, I guess, two roads in isolation from all the rest of the scheme. At the moment, all roads, or the vast majority of roads in the area, are open to through traffic. And if we don't actively do something to discourage people from driving those short journeys, they'll continue driving them, and they might even drive more often. So I think particularly in response to COVID, with the reduced capacity of public transport, the option of not filtering streets is likely to result in an increase in traffic on all roads. So I really think it's important to keep that in mind, that kind of the approach of not filtering streets is not led to a reduction in traffic. It's led to an continuous increase in speeding and in road danger. And this is really kind of the approach that in most cases has resulted in transformative impact. Why does Manor Road have a crossing if you're going to place a filter? Does it make more sense to join the parks? Yeah, definitely. It definitely makes sense to join the parks. I think just the number of symbols we had on that map were already quite a lot. So I think just the crossing symbol was used to just sort of show an improved crossing, but definitely in that location. Obviously in the short term, we can't cross it over as part of the trial, but in the long term, the idea is definitely crossing that over. Who made these decisions? What data did they have available? So hopefully we showed a bit of data that sort of underpins the design. But in terms of decision making, the MCC is the final decision maker on the scheme that goes in. Councillors obviously have a huge say on decisions as well, and those are kind of the two key decision points. So we'll move on to the live Q&A. So Councillor Bernard Stone, if you can pick out some of the ones that maybe touch on different points that we haven't covered so far, and then the team can answer some of them.
Okay, thanks very much for the presentation. Can I just say a couple of words before I take the questions? About the pause, it was councillors in conjunction with other people, officers, who decided that we needed a pause on the scheme because of all the feedback that we've been getting from residents, which I think is really good. It shows that people are engaged and want to go forward with engagement into the future. There was a question about how long the pause will be. We've not put a time on that because of, I think, what Andrew said earlier about COVID, etc. We would have liked to have some face-to-face public meetings, but that is obviously not possible at the moment. So we might be looking at, as Andrew said, some face-to-face meetings in the streets. But the other thing about consultation is that we've asked that letters are going out, and Andrew has already said letters will be going out to all households in the next week or so, and before the scheme is implemented, more letters will also be going out. So basically everybody can influence what is going on before the trial comes in. What we as councillors asked officers and the Bee Network to look at were things that some of the questions that have come today, like the bus gates, how will they work, are they in the right places, will they be needed, and also some of the other questions about traffic being moved on to places like Matthews Lane, Cromwell Grove, Mount Road, to do some sort of analysis of that. And I think we've had some answers to that today, but obviously that we'll continue to do that going forward. Right, some of the questions, I've grouped quite a lot of the questions. There's some very individual questions which I'm going to ask the officers and Bee Networks respond to individually, but I'm just going to group some of the questions that we've had this morning. First of all, about future funding, how much money have we got? Will the recession affect any future plans? And how will COVID, etc., affect funding? So who's going to answer that?
I will do. I'll have that. So we got, as part of the programme entry, we got £2.5 million. So the bid was for 3.8, and so there's things in there that need to get taken out of that. So I think we're looking at the work around Station South stuff has been taken out, and the stuff around the cycle hubs has been taken out. This was something that TFGM felt that wasn't necessary to deliver this scheme and deliver the benefits that we think we can get. So in terms of the surety of funding, we've been told, and this is something we're just as worried as anyone else, that we've been told that it shouldn't have any impact. It's the localised funding, so we're encouraged to try and get things done as soon as possible. It's not very, it's quite underspent at the moment, so it feels that if we can try and get things in as soon as possible, we've got a better chance of getting the funding. So that said, we still want to follow the same procedure that we've said from the outset. We've said to all the residents that we're going to do a 6-month trial. We've said to TFGM we're going to do a 6-month trial. So we're not going to all of a sudden chop it to 3 months just because we want to get the funding a bit quicker. It's not part of the sell that we've given to everyone. So yeah, COVID and other things, we've been reassured that there's not been there hasn't been any kind of reduction or restriction of this funding. And if we did find out anything, we'd let everyone know, because we want to manage expectations. We don't want people expecting to be able to do all these things, and if we can't afford it, we want to be able to tell people that as soon as possible. Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrew. If we can move on to consultation, I think there has been a lot of concern about consultation, and we've had a presentation earlier about what's happened in the past, but can we just clarify exactly what consultation we're going to be doing over the next few weeks and months?
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Andrew.
Go on. I think we've got aspirations that we want to do these face-to-face events. I think that's traditionally it's what we've done, and it's how it works best. These are kind of events such as this. It's pseudo face-to-face, but it's still doesn't have the same effect. So we'd like to do those, whether that be in a location or whether we do walking around, stuff like that. We speak to different councils about potentially going out with them and doing some door knocking to speak to people. We also, this is underpinned by Commonplace, so it's always live. You're always able to give feedback on Commonplace at any time. Also, people are able to give feedback through the trial website, etc. So this all then gets collated into how we assess things. So we'll pull things together. So have you got anything more, Pauline?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in terms of Levenshulme Bee Network and people getting in touch, please email with your suggestions, ideas around the neighbourhood for places that we could have open events, potentially open air events, and anywhere else that you think we could be putting notices or maps. We've got a list on the Q&As of where we'll be putting the large maps so that people can view them. But if you think there's any other types of events that we could be doing, you know, maybe showing people the webinar in church halls and you know, public spaces as well, to help people understand the design elements, and that, you know, that would be really helpful to connect with us and to let us speak to those people that we haven't been able to connect with so far. And Andrew, I just wanted to clarify, because I think there's a bit of confusion around the original bid document. There was reference to Station South, which myself and Abigail Pound are directors of, in that document, and there was never, and I need to clarify that very clearly, there's never been any suggestion that any money whatsoever would be going to Station South project from this bid. So the removal of Station South within it, I think Andrew just means that it was a factor of value, added value, that Station South was a popular impetus for this project to gain programme entry. So the swell of people that supported Station South, which was over 1,000 people in a crowdfunder, was used to indicate that people like active travel in the area, like the idea of it, and would support further interventions. So TFGM basically approved, gave us a high point from the bid, from the programme entry, gave us a high point on that, because they were confident that that was a kind of boost to the active travel in the area. So that's all it is, but there is no money lining the pockets of myself or Abigail Pound. And the reason that we are both working in this project is very much because we believe in active travel as a health equality and subject. So that's basically all I wanted to say. I just wanted to clarify that we are not lining our pockets.
Just one last point from me on the consultation. I think it's really important to remind people that the public consultation starts when the trial starts. That's from a legal standpoint. That is when the consultation starts. If you want to be able to change what's going on the ground, that's inherent. So the public consultation only starts once things are put out as a trial. So all the work that's been done to date is before the consultation starts. So I think it's, obviously a lot of work has been done to reach out to communities before any sort of formal announcement was made. I think it's really important to remind people of that. This is all community engagement in addition to the statutory requirement. The statutory requirement is for none of this. The statutory requirement is that you start a public consultation when the trial goes in. So obviously, we'll continue to do it, to try our best to reach out to as many people as possible. But from a legal standpoint, the consultation only starts when the trial goes in.
And just to add to that, the process that we've adopted for this project and the experimental nature of the kind of legal process we're going through enables us to change the scheme and modify it and make improvements and slight tweaks and things if things aren't working. And that's from when it starts and through the process of the experimental period. And that's the whole point of it. And again, with projects such as this that are so landscape changing and the first happening anywhere in the north of England, really, of course, we've got lots of evidence from Waltham Forest, where I've been involved in, Lambeth, where I've been involved in, and lots of other projects that Judo could quote. But again, we appreciate that this is the first project in the Northwest, it's the first project in Manchester, and we want to get it right. And that can only happen with people from Levenshulme helping to develop it, because it's your project. It is for the people of Levenshulme, and that's the whole point of this engagement process coming up through this trial, is for you people to help make sure that it's absolutely right, and the things on the ground enable everybody to go about their lives in the right way and as stress-free as possible.
Okay, thanks very much. I mean, as councillors, we will be obviously involved in going forward. I know about the legal side of things, that legally it starts when the trial starts, but I think we would like to see consultation, people being able to put in the views all the way through before the trial starts. And I think with the port, I think we've got a good opportunity to do that. On information, people have asked about what documents have been used in the past, what people can see. So will they be posted onto the Beeline's website and see an analysis of what traffic flows there are? Can they be posted?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, we're trying to really up the amount of information that's on there. Obviously, not to deluge. I suppose we're trying to make it as user-friendly and as reader-friendly as possible, but maybe also have links to different things so that people can look at the full detail if they want to. Sort of a bit of a balance, because conscious that some people may want to have that detail. So yeah, and a lot of the time, in terms of the traffic count stuff, yep, we've got information, the telemetric information that we can upload. We have it for different times of the day. So morning, afternoon, peak, evening, and at night time. So we can upload that. In terms of the modelling stuff, we're working with colleagues at UTC at the moment to pull all that together, and once it's available, can publish that as well. And yeah, and if there's requests for anything else, we try and upload it as soon as possible.
On the back of that, people have said that emails and things have not been answered. Certainly, emails I've had to try to answer as promptly as possible. So can we ensure that any emails to the network are answered
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of clarify that, we've had a lot of emails. So we've got a lot of responses. So what we're trying to do is, when there's a thread to it and a common theme, put it in a Q&A and put it in and upload those. So we are looking at anything that comes through as a question. We're uploading those every week on the web page, so that we think that if somebody's asking a certain question, another person in the area may also have the interest in answering that question. So rather than individually answer it to somebody, we'll answer it to everyone. And then if there's other bits that are sort of raised, we can always sort of contact people directly.
Yeah. We're going to try and make sure, Bernard, that when we do update the weekly Q&As from now on, that we send it out to the mailing list. So we'll do like a bulletin of updates, and including things like events as well. So if people want to get onto that mailing list, they can email hello@levenshulmebeenetwork.co.uk, and I will add them up there. And that's the first point of call for information, is to look at those weekly.
Yeah, can I encourage people to do that? It's important that as many people as possible feed into the process. Right, just a very specific question. So, in the presentation, it said a majority of journeys undertaken are just, I think it was 1 kilometre. I think somebody picked up in one of the questions. What are these journeys for, and what analysis have you got to support that?
I think it's around the 30% of journeys are under 1 kilometre. It's something from the TFGM travel information. They do travel surveys, and so we're trying to get this information out to people as well. They review it. I don't know, Pete, are you able to give a bit more information about this? Are you there, Peter?
No. I don't think Peter's there.
Is he not on?
No.
Is he not on the call? Okay, fair enough. Sorry. But yeah, we can provide more information about how that works and how they assess it, etc. Put it up online.
But I would say it's pretty common. Like it's quite a well-known sort of figure across the sort of transport planning sector. You can probably find it on the DFT website as well. I mean, there's lots of reasons people. Some people have to drive short journeys. Some people maybe that are physically impaired, or people that maybe are sort of older age. But there are a lot of those trips that are school run trips. A lot of those trips that are it's just a lot of our cities are built to make driving as convenient as possible, and actually many people don't have safe alternatives. For many people, that driving that journey, it feels like the safest way to do it, because the roads are so busy, because the air is so unpleasant to breathe, and people will obviously drive those journeys if it's the most convenient way to do it. But if you create an environment which makes walking and cycling a lot more pleasant, like we've seen during lockdown, a lot of people will all of a sudden change the way they move, and this project actively aims to do this with a trial.
And following on from that, quite a number of people have asked about the school streets, why weren't they included in the first phase? Because if to encourage people to actually walk to school, that would be something that probably would do that. So can we clarify exactly where we are with school streets?
Yeah, happy to respond to that one. So as I mentioned, we've been working with the schools, and the conversations we've been having over the last week is that it's very much about working with the schools, working with families. So we're looking at doing a timed a one-day trial in September and October. Obviously, when the schools go back, they've got a bit of adjustment initially, so we're looking to run those trials as soon as possible, really, to sort of see what happens on the ground with those, and to find out what the feedback is from people, and then to look at how it can be rolled out.
Thank you. Going back to bus gates, I think there's a bus gate proposed for the top of Stowell Avenue onto Northmoor Road, which is outside Crowcroft Park School. Have the school been consulted about that?
Well, they'll have been discussed as part of this. I mean, the location's been identified there as the most suitable for sort of stopping traffic. But in terms of, it's something that we looked at and try to identify the best place that will work best for the schools. If we do it further up the roads, it creates almost like a bit of a cul-de-sac on that road that the the cars may be using to turn around, so it could become more unsafe. So if anything, it almost creates quite a quiet area from the end of Stouffville up to where the houses are there, because there's a bit of a green area in between. So, but again, it's one of these things where we can work with the schools. In terms of schools towards just on the boundaries, they haven't been, they weren't part of the original scope, but we're starting to widen that scope. The risk being though that it's not an endless pot of money, so we have to kind of make sure that we work with who we need to work with, but we can't keep on extending out and out and out because we don't have enough funding to cover out and out and out. But we will be having conversations with schools like that one.
As I said earlier, one of the pauses that the council has asked for is on bus gates anyway, so it can be picked up in that. I think we're running out of time, but just the last question is about sending traffic onto Matthews Lane, Cromwell, Mount Road, etc. People have said, what analysis have you done on that, or will that be done going forward?
It will be done going forward, yeah, as part of the modelling, and we will look at where things are going. In terms of the Cromwell Road area, we're speaking to UTC about an improvement on the junction at the end of there. It's not the nicest to come out of, so the turn right, it's not possible. So we'll be looking at, UTC are involved in any kind of traffic lights and junction design, so they have their own views about how that would work and how the capacity along the A6 would work. So we have to work with them. We can't just sort of say we want this to happen, but it is that, and the junction at the bottom of Broom Lane are being reviewed at the moment by them. And then, yeah, we will provide the information about modelling once we've got it.
And one of the other things that's important to say about sort of filtering areas and being able to manage traffic on the main road network is that you can do exactly that. I mean, obviously your UTC team and people have then control of traffic that should be main road traffic, through road traffic, and using the network appropriately to access the local area, using the right junctions, and signal times and everything can be managed accordingly. If people are fundamentally shortcutting and jumping lights and driving around them, then actually you lose control over that situation. And again, that often leads to chaos with people meeting each other in back streets and getting in each other's way.
Okay, thank you. There was a question, it's not on here, but it was raised earlier about the possibility of having traffic lights at the junction with Mount Road and Barlow Road, where it goes up to Stockport, something people have asked for years. Has anything been considered about that?
I think it's been highlighted as an improvement area, but we can look at it. We certainly can look at it, yeah, and see. Yeah, go on, Julio.
No, I think that's it. I think we're running out of time, so we were just going to end thanking everyone for their time, for attending, for very, very helpful questions and answers, some very positive comments in the chat about people that are excited for the transformative potential, and people who, notice that, no scheme is going to be perfect, but a trial really does afford the opportunity to try to improve the situation and to make adjustments so that all the issues that local residents have can be addressed, or as many as possible. And that, the status quo, the way that our streets are at the moment, is so dangerous and is so, and we've also been urged by central government to take urgent action, particularly on COVID, to reallocate space to walking and cycling, because not doing so will just mean a car-based recovery, which will make congestion worse, it'll make air quality worse, it'll make our streets more dangerous, and all of the streets in the area. So granted, no scheme will be perfect, but the scheme as currently designed delivers huge benefits across the whole area, much more than not trying to deliver change. You'll see some points on this slide about how you can get involved. So the Q&As, which are now published on the website, and I'll answer a lot of the questions that were raised today, and we'll continue to update those. We're still tweaking the design. That's the reason for the pause in the program. We'll still be engaging with people. We'll be sending out letters to make sure you can be involved and you can be kept up to date. You can sign up for the mailing list. And absolutely, before anything goes on the ground, MCC will send everyone a letter, and anything that goes on the ground will be a trial. So thanks very much. We're really excited, and hopefully you can come along with us on this journey.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.